How do changes in data impact measures of center and variability? Think about this question during the lesson. Part A. Gary reviews the scores on his weekly quizzes. Should Gary use the mean or the median to get the best sense of how well he is doing on his weekly quizzes? Find the mean and the median. What is the mean of the data?
Select your answer.
To find the mean, find the sum of the scores of Gary's quizzes. Then divide the sum by the number of quizzes, 10. The mean is 88 7/10. Now find the median. There are two middle values, 90 and 91. The median is the mean of those values. The median is 90 5/10. How can you use the spread and clustering of the data to decide which statistical measure to use? Look for clusters, gaps, and outliers when considering what the measures of center tell you about Gary's scores. The mean, 88.7, is affected by the outlier. The outlier causes the mean to be less than the values of the largest cluster of data. The median, 90.5, is in the middle of the cluster of his typical scores. Gary should use the median, 90.5, because the outlier does not affect it. The mean and the median are close in value. How else could you argue for the median as the best measure of center? Most of Gary's scores are 90 and above, so the median better reflects what he usually scores. Part B. Gary missed the next quiz and received a score of 0 on it. How did the new quiz score impact Gary's mean quiz score? How did it impact his median quiz score? To find the mean, calculate the sum of the scores of all 11 quizzes. Then divide the sum by 11. Gary's mean quiz score is now 80 6/10. To find the median, order the values from least to greatest and find the middle value. Gary's median quiz score is now 90. The 11th score, 0, lowered the mean by 8 points, lowered the median only by half a point. Now you know how changes in data impact measures of center.
If Gary makes up the missing quiz and gets a score of 70, how does that impact his mean score?
So you would take the data of his test. We already found the mean in the first part of the example. And that mean was 88 7/10. So if he makes up that missing quiz, instead of a 0, he now has a score of a 70 to replace it with. So now he replaces the 0 with the 70. You add up the numbers again, all of the scores of his tests, and divide it by 11, and the new mean that he would have with including that missing quiz would be 80 6/10. So the question is, how does him making up the quiz impact his mean score? Well, now his mean score went from 80.6 or 80 6/10 to 87. So his mean or his average went up. So now you know, like when you guys get a 0 on an assignment, how far down your grade goes. He went from having a low B to now having a high B. So it's very important with grades that you are actually getting good grades, because that's how your average, which is that final grade you guys see in Pinnacle, that is how you get those grades, because your most of your assignments are that grade. That's what your average is your mean. So that's a good example.
John and Yoshi are computer lab partners. During a spreadsheet project, they decide to enter their French quiz scores on their shared tablet. Part A. Why might John choose a measure of center to describe his French quiz scores? John's scores contain an outlier, 65, which affects the mean and the range of his scores. The median, 90 and 5/10, is an appropriate measure of his French quiz scores. Now, let's solve Part B. Why might Yoshi choose a measure of variability to describe her French quiz scores? Yoshi's scores do not include an outlier. The range of Yoshi's French quiz scores is 8. Her lowest quiz score is 8 points lower than her highest quiz score.
Suppose the French teacher decides to drop each student's lowest quiz score. How does that affect the choice of a measure of center and a measure of variability of John's and Yoshi's scores? Explain.
John's lowest score is 65. Without his lower score, John's mean quiz score is 90 and 4/9. That's if we added them all up and divided it by 10. His median score would be, because he has 10 grades, so we're going to look at the two middle ones, 90 and 91, add them, then divide by 2, and that gives us the median of 91. Without his lowest score, the range of John's quiz score is blank. So first, let's look for his lowest. His lowest score is that 65 that we talked about earlier. So if we take that out, his lowest score now is 87. So the lowest score would be 87. His greatest score is 93. Then you subtract them and you get a 6. And so his range will be of 6 points for the score. So his IQR of his scores, so we are going to find the median of the upper and lower quartile. So now, instead of having 10 grades, he has 9 grades. So now his median actually changes, right? So the middle number would be 91. And so we look at the lower quartile and the upper. So the lower is 4 numbers. So we have 2 middle numbers, 87 and 88. So we would add those together and divide by 2. And we get 87 and 5/10 as the lower quartile number. And then we look at the upper and we add 93 and 93 divided by 2, and you get 93 as the upper quartile. This is also known as quartile 1. This is quartile 3. All right, so we then now take that 87 and 5/10 and subtract it from the 93, and we'll get the IQR as, we get the IQR as 5 and 5/10. And now the answer to the question is to explain why, let me go back, is to explain how does that affect the choice of measure of center and a measure of variability of John's and Yoshi's score. So after the lowest score for John is dropped, he might choose his median now, because now his median score is now 91, which is still good. And Yoshi might choose her IQR instead of her median, because her median would be in the 80s, but her IQR is saying that there's only the average of her grades are only a difference of about 5 points. So that represents her grades in a positive way. So that's why they would choose one or the other, or how it would affect their choices. Let's do Yoshi. So Yoshi, her lowest score is 80. Her lowest score is 80. Without her lowest score, her mean, so that means we would not use that 80, right? So now she has 9 scores. So her mean would be 84 and 4/9. And then her median would now be 1, 2, 3, 4, now be 84 as her middle number. Then her, without her lowest score, the range of Yoshi's quiz scores would now be between 88 and 80. And that's a range of 8 points. And so her IQR would be to take the median of the upper and lower. So if we look at the lower first, we now have 4. So there's 2 middle numbers. So that's going to give us 82 as her lower quartile, or quartile 1. And then we have the upper. You got the 2 middle, 86 plus 88 divided by 2. And that gives us 87. So 87 would be the upper quartile, or quartile 3. And then we subtract them. So 87 minus 82 gives us 5. So the IQR is 5. So as I mentioned before, she would choose to use her measure of variability